I remember when I was in university and I read this book, The Art of
Uh-oh.
Seduction.
Uh-oh.
This
Got you
book,
in a lot of trouble.
it got me into a lot of trouble. I read the book many times with surprising effectiveness, which I can't go into any detail because I'm sure my mother will watch this podcast, so I'm going to have to stay tight-lipped about
Oh,
it.
come on, come
I'm
on.
sorry, I have to stay tight-lipped about it. But I would love to ask, because you've
Yeah.
been in a relationship, I believe you may even be married now. What are some of the best strategies that you found for making a relationship work?
Well, the art of seduction isn't really about having a long-term relationship, although it can be used for that. It's more for like being in your 20s and going out and having some fun, both for men and women, gay, straight, whatever, right? So it's not really a book about long-term, but it can be. And sort of the main thrust of it is that you need to be other directed. So people who are bad at seduction, using let's just go into the male seducer right now. He is thinking of himself. He's and he's not even aware of that. He really wants to impress the woman, really wants to impress her. He finds it very, for whatever reason, right? But he's thinking about himself. He's thinking about, what can I say that will impress her? What can I wear that will impress her? Where do I take her that will have the right impression? It's unconsciously, it's all about me, and my insecurities and my worries, right? And the other person senses this. Seduction is a language. It's a hidden language, like a mating ritual. It's not with words, it's feelings. We sense the other person. And a woman has very good radar, very good antennae. She can sense your insecurities. She can sense that your world revolves around you and your feelings, and it's kind of off putting. That's your main barrier. So to break through that barrier, you need to shut up that me. You have to get rid of your insecurities, and you have to be able to focus on her. What's her world like? What are her ideas? What are her values? What makes her excited? What makes her bored? You know? And suddenly, if you start trying to, what I say, enter their spirit, enter her spirit, and enter her way of thinking, and even imagining, although it's not easy to cross genders, even though we live in this cross gendering era, you can even imagine what it might have been like to be her growing up with her parents, her good parents or her bad parents, and all the experiences she's had, right? And the more
Yeah.
you can enter into her world, she will feel it, and you will give her the kind of attention that is individualized. And that is the greatest difference between a really effective seducer and someone who's just awful at it, the anti seducer. Because the bad seducer treats the other person as if they're kind of a clone of everybody. They're not the woman, they're woman. They're all the other women, and they're not seeing the person as an individual with their own tastes and their own weirdness. They're just seeing this kind of caricature. They're seeing projections of their mother. They're seeing projections of all the other women that they've had in the past. To turn that around and to be actually focusing on her as an individual is already insanely seductive, right? Because it means you're individualizing your attention. And think in your own life, how often do you ever get the feeling, even outside of the sexual realm, that somebody is thinking of me as an individual, right? It's pretty rare.
Pretty rare.
It's pretty rare to get that sensation. Maybe your best friend, etc. Doesn't happen often. So, for instance, if you're giving a gift, gifts can be very seductive or they can be very anti seductive. If you just give a woman an expensive ring, or you give her a box of chocolates thinking you're being so thoughtful, it's like what anybody would give. It's generic. It's not. But if you think it's something that's cheap, it's only costs like 10 quid or something. It's not some expensive gift, but it's about something she was talking about. It's about something that's got some emotional resonance about it. That's a gift with seductive power because it's individualized. So that's the main barrier. And once you've crossed that barrier, If you can continue doing that within the relationship, if you don't stop, you don't and they don't become too familiar and you don't become too bored, you can still keep trying to find new things out about them, still trying to enter their world. It will keep the relationship somewhat fresh because normally, familiarity breeds contempt, as they say. And so you want to be able to fight that. So that's kind of my short answer on that one. Relatively short.
If someone has been a seducer and they've experienced a variety of partners and eventually they reach a stage where they want to have a family or they want to settle down and look for more stability, how could that person overcome the kind of grass is always greener effect? How can they get out of that seducer mindset in a long-term relationship?
It's not easy. I'm not saying that it's easy. Um, you're always going to be tempted, particularly in our culture, and particularly if you've had success before in the past. Um, but you have to think of, why do you want a long-term relationship? You want a long-term relationship because you want some stability in your life, and you also happen to love the other person, and you want to stay with them and have something deep. And so there's a trade-off. You're not going to have the excitement of the hunt and all of the thrills that come from seduction. It's not going to be like this and this and this and this. It's going to be more like kind of constant going up. And as you're older, maybe that's the rhythm of life that you want. And then you have to think of, do I want to be alone my whole life? It's kind of fun when you're in your 20s and 30s, but when you're in your 40s, it starts to get a little pathetic. And when you're in your 50s, you start looking like someone who can't grow up. And other people are kind of judging you for the good or for bad. I have nothing against, I'm not moralizing because I have nothing against men or women who still want to seduce. That's fine if that's their lifestyle. But if you sense that there's something kind of meaningless about it and that you want the depth that comes from a long-term relationship, you have to change your notion of pleasure. Your notion of pleasure isn't going to be in the hunt and getting her seduced and having the wild sex and having all this fun and adventure. It's going to be getting to know her better, to having all of these shared memories and shared experiences get richer and richer as you get older and older, and to have your connection getting deeper, and maybe to have a family, have children, and all those things. So they're not like the roller coaster ride, but you have to change your notion of what pleasure is. And it's actually a good idea in some ways to constantly adapt change your notion of pleasure to your age. So what I felt was pleasurable when I was 21 is not what I feel is necessarily the most pleasurable thing now that I'm 61. I'm sorry to say my age, but um, you know, and if I still was searching for those things when I was 21, it wouldn't feel right. I've had to adapt. I've had to change what gives me satisfaction and what gives me fulfillment. And so maybe every 7 years, because psychologists really like glom onto that idea of 7 years as a kind of evaluation period. Every 7 years or so, you evaluate yourself and you go, those things that I really was chasing after when I was 28 and now I'm 35, they don't mean so much to me anymore. What is it that I really want? That's a very healthy process to go through. But you just have to basically come to terms with the fact that your notion of what is pleasurable and exciting has to alter. And if you can't alter, you can't really be in a relationship.